Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? So I'm gonna open up the panel by saying that GPT is this innovation is new and fresh since 2016, like a baby that needs nurturing. We have experience with chatbots for customer service calling insurance or fraudulent activity since 1992. Now it can output answers like Einstein writing to you in multiple languages. Be mindful, the information in the output is theoretical, not practical or emotional based. I will pass it on to the next speaker. And who wants to go next?
I want to do something practical. And this is about the non-evolution of travel. So here's a screen of Travelocity in 1996. Where do you want to go from and to? And here's a screen in 2023. Where do you want to go from and to? It hasn't changed at all. And so in 2014, I set out to fix this with an AI company to be able to do something like this, to say hotel in Singapore for anniversary, near Emerald Hill, a business class ticket with a beautiful pool, spend less than 10K. And this was the kind of answer you could get. And we did this in 2014. We did this, a 2-bedroom home near downtown in a great yard, an Airbnb kind of message. And by analyzing reviews and images, so you can ask this question and you immediately get an answer where you see hotels on Emerald Hill with a pool at the right price. You can't do that on any travel website today, but we did it years ago. Or you could ask this question for a hotel with a great yard. Airbnb doesn't know that they have places with a great yard, but by analyzing images, we knew that. And we reinforced it with a review. Or what if you could do this and go to American Airlines and say, what islands can my wife and I visit in February using miles? And instead of playing mileage roulette, it gave you the answer. So that was our goal, but we could only do it for one hotel chain at a time or one destination at a time. It was extremely difficult. And the reason is it took intensive supervised training and a lot of testing to make sure it was right. What's going on with generative AI and particularly GPT? Well, you have unsupervised learning. You have now dedicated AI chips that are incredibly powerful. You have huge amounts of data that can be analyzed. And I think you could really now build a travel app where you could ask questions about the whole world. So here's one example that I saw online. The person said, I want 3 local budget-friendly vegan restaurants in Paris with links. And here are 3 reviews of restaurants with links. Boom. You can't do that with Google. If you ask Google, what's the best hotel in Scotland with spa and golf, it says, I have 9.4 million answers. Well, that's not really useful. But if you ask ChatGPT, it says Glen Eagles and Turnberry, which is the right answer. So my view is, at least in my business, if you fed it all 2.5 million hotels from Booking.com, the billion reviews from TripAdvisors, all the images in Google, and every article in Condé Nast Traveler, you could ask this kind of question about anything. So there's a practical example of what you might be able to do as this technology evolves and gets fed the right data. Because it has amazing data today, but it doesn't have all the data. So that's my practical example.
So your vision might be realized, Terry.
I think it could be. The company failed, but it's interesting. It didn't fail because the tech didn't work back then. It failed because we couldn't get travel companies to change and adopt. But I think now people are so much more excited about this reaching, 100 million users. Companies are, I think, ready to adopt.
Terry, we should talk because we're actually working on some of these use cases at Runday. Most specifically, we partnered with OpenTable, and say the 4 of us here wanted to meet for dinner because we were in Miami, and one of us has a gluten allergy. It can actually say, hey, let's meet with these 7 folk, considering the nutritional requirements, and check open, and then make an appointment for us based on the availability of the restaurant. So we're Runday, we're coordinating all these different resources and filtering them based on requirements, like example, food preferences or dietary. But the idea of sending one email and then having a restaurant reservation for a group of several people, some of which have dietary requirements, is actually a use case we have in our R&D. It's not launched yet, but that is something
Well,
we are
let's
doing.
talk, because the CEO of Open Table was the CEO of Kayak, and I was chair there, and Steve's a good friend, so that'd be fun.
Awesome. No, actually, the original vision behind Run Day was actually around restaurants and geolocation, but then pandemic hit right away, so we
Right.
pivoted toward Zoom meetings and things like that. But it's definitely on our roadmap.
Great.
I guess you're next, Sanjay.
Yeah, so I'm Sanjay. I've been working on AI and analytics all my career, and wanted to talk a little bit about ChatGPT, but in the context of sort of how we got here and where we're going. And even since the 24 hours when I made that bullet, there's been a couple major announcements. Sam Altman's over at Microsoft right now. He's speaking there in a couple hours on the Redmond campus. But really, ChatGPT was a culmination of really half a century of work. It was really catalyzed by Elon Musk and his concerns about AI and ethics, and Sam and team kind of created that direction. And it's really a generative AI that's based on the transformer model. So we've had neural networks for a while. We've had more specific types of neural networks over the last decade that can do certain things as good or better than a human, like reading handwriting or reading text from an image, and those are convolutional neural networks. Those evolved into recurrent neural networks, which took sequence into consideration. So anything that has an order of operations, including, say, stock data or a sentence where the order of the words changed the meaning. So those, we call recurrent, that evolved into LSTMs, which are more optimal versions of that worked well in finance as well as language translation. But the challenge they had was they couldn't scale. So to train an LSTM could take hundreds of years, and you could not do it in parallel. So ChatGPT 3.5, for example, takes about 288 years to train, but they do it in parallel, and that's the power of the transformer model. There was a paper was called "Attention is All You Need," and described how to create this sort of self-referential matrix. And the advantage was, it did the same thing the LSTM did, but you could squeeze hundreds of years of training where it literally read every book and literally read every Wikipedia article into, several months. And that, created the miracle of, ChatGPT 3.0. The challenge was it wasn't diplomatic. If you asked it, some concerning questions, it would often tell you something we wouldn't want, from a liability perspective, wouldn't want to say. It also pretended it was human. So if you asked it, are you human? The statistical average of all human literature has AI saying, yes, I'm human. So 3.0 claimed it was human. 3.5 added, what's being called a constitutional AI, which there's sort of layers of rules that it's not allowed to violate. And there's a company, that's based on some of the team that's doing that now, Anthropic. And so that's where we're sort of at today. We have ChatGPT, which is really a diplomatic version, transformer-based model that could read every book and every article that we can feed it, with a degree of human supervision and sort of some kind of constitution. And now over the next even 24 hours, in some cases, we're going to see, Google releasing Bard and Microsoft integrating what I think is ChatGPT 4.0, which is really, it's not a bigger model from my understanding, it's just a more efficient model that's even more diplomatic into Bing searches. So Google searches, Bing searches are going to very soon contain some of the miraculous responses that we're seeing from ChatGPT. And then, my work is really in this idea of coordinating the world's calendar, that, an enterprise has a calendar, or a business or a couple wants to get a couples massage. I mean, it's so awkward to make phone calls anymore. There's a demographics collapse that prevents you from really building call centers or finding people to answer the phone. So our belief is within 5 or 10 years, every business needs a phone number or a method for the consumers to interact, to schedule an appointment, whether that's, couples massage, fixing your car windshield, a job interview, where there's elements of that, like reading resumes, transactions, signatures, that the AI will also engage with, just like an incredible employee or assistant would. But that's, things are headed in a very rapid path. And I think we're going to start saying generative AI, and having dozens of examples of that instead of this sort of one ChatGPT. And they don't have a monopoly in what they're doing. We're going to see this everywhere.
All right. Hiraj,
Do I go next?
go for it.
All
Yes,
right, great.
go next. Okay.
All right, I do have a presentation, so can everybody see my screen?
It says you started, but there we go.
All right, great, great. All right, so ChatGPT, all right, understanding the benefits and limitations. Hi guys, my name is Istiak Doza. I'm joining you from Bangladesh, and yeah, I'm a copywriter, marketing professional copywriter. So I heard that my job was on the chopping block due to ChatGPT. So I thought I'd chip in a little bit about what I think is actually and I explored this for the last 1 year, and these are some of the topics that I want to cover. Introduction, I'm just going to skip over that because I don't think I could have done a better job. I am not from technical background. I'm just a marketing professional. So one of the things I noticed as a copywriter is that last year, for almost a year, I played around with this, and I noticed it increased my efficiency, which means when I'm creating marketing copies, help me save a lot of time. Ideation, when you think of ways to market a product, it can give you like 100 different ideas, and you can narrow it down to 10, 1, and that's how you do it successfully. And yeah, it does create a lot of it's pretty good at what it does in terms of increased efficiency. Number of outputs, as you know, ChatGPT is a language model, right? It's got one report I read said that it had 175 billion parameters. I have no idea what that means, but apparently it means that it can draw on a lot of what I think is it draws on a lot of experiences or inputs and everything.
One way to think about it is, if you think of the human brain and synapses, there's about 500 trillion synapses in the human mind. You can roughly equate parameter to a biological synapse. So if ChatGPT is 175, human brain is 500 trillion. It's still a big difference, but one that you can see us catching up with the rate of progress.
Yeah, exactly. One of the most important thing that ChatGPT as a copywriter allowed me to do was achieve a level of scalability that was I didn't have that beforehand. So if a client comes to me and tells me, hey, I need 30 days of social media content, all right, I can actually do that with something like ChatGPT. Okay, I can paraphrase it. I can target. Most clients have different target audience. I can cater every social media post to customize it to a different target audience. That you can do very easily. And of course, as a result, I have more free time, more time for what I would like to call creative endeavors, and more time for family, which is always important. Now, limitations. Because ChatGPT is basically in a roundabout way vomiting out, all right, what has been fed to it. Okay, it kind of lacks originality. I mean, it after a while you see it's doing the same thing over and over again. It can't come up with innovative ideas, which is a human thing for now, at least, and not a source of truth as well, because ChatGPT kind of makes stuff up sometimes, which is can be very annoying. My opinion is that it will not replace subject matter expertise. So as a copywriter, I can look at a copy and say, hey, you know what? Okay, this is okay, like 50%, 65% okay. But almost every copy I've written in the last 1 year had to be like, it's like maybe 65% ChatGPT, and then I had to go back in, and the rest I had to fix, okay, rewrite, paraphrase, whatever you want to call it. And as for impact on professional copywriters such as myself, I don't think it's going to have that much. I think the shift will be, we will need to, the ChatGPT will create I would say a skeleton, and we will probably rework it into, more innovative and more creativity and everything. And of course, emotional. Now, that's something ChatGPT does not always get right. my opinion is that it's going to I am leveraging ChatGPT to do work for my clients, and it has been very rewarding. Okay, I'll give you some numbers afterwards, and when it comes to key takeaways, one thing, it develops a lot of content very fast, but does not automatically mean better content. Cannot replace expertise, as I said, lacks creativity, lacks originality, and cannot always guarantee true facts, at present, at least. Oversight is always needed. Whichever field you're in, if you're a CPA, if you're a lawyer, you can use ChatGPT to summarize something and maybe ask for ideas or whatnot. But it will need oversight for the time being, because if I remember correctly, ChatGPT is only updated to about 2021, I think. Somewhere it's getting there, it's getting closer to us, but it's it's a bit working on outdated information at the moment. So I will leave you with this one quote, which I thought of basically. ChatGPT and similar technologies will replace whatever deserves replacing. That's it. Okay. Anyways, this is my my LinkedIn profile, and anyone wants to connect, please do connect. And one question though, right? How much of this presentation do you think was written by ChatGPT? Can anyone guess?
All of it?
65%. Thank you.
Adam's got a question real quick, and I know Safa wants to talk.
Yeah, quickly, the primary language in this is English, as I understand it, and there are other languages that it can work with. Now, there are nuances in languages, how you present things and how questions are presented and how they're answered. How do you square that?
Anyone?
Can I
Yeah,
answer?
that's precisely the innovation that we got between LSTM technologies, which are in place a couple years ago. I mean, we looked at 117 chatbots about a year ago, and only 3 of them could answer certain things like what is 2 + 2, when it was outside of the scope of what it was sort of designed to do. And so the big difference and why this is so world changing is the transformer architecture is able to really understand the deep nuance of language based on an incredible amount of evidence that it gathers. It can also handle multiple language. I think I did see some example, might have been on Twitter, where they asked it to create a language which included, or create a paragraph that included multiple languages in one paragraph, and it made sense to somebody that knew all 3 of those languages. So that's really, that what you're offering was really a big limitation of LSTM technology. And that's why a lot of chatbots in existence today don't work very well. And so these transformer models are uniquely capable of human or even superhuman level, understand NLU, natural language understanding of language, where they can craft, I mean, it's not even language nuance, it's write a poem, about based on this rap song, in the dialect, in the way Einstein speaks. It's a level of comprehension of language that I think is beyond what even a lot of what linguists can really do today.
But I think Safa, you want to?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Safa runs a VC, or you'll probably introduce yourself better than I would. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have an early stage venture firm here in Silicon Valley called Think Plus Ventures, and I've had the pleasure to be at 361 events for the past year or so, and I've enjoyed them very much. First of all, a disclosure that none of what I'm saying was generated by ChatGPT. These are all my own thoughts. And there is really little I can add, because the previous panelists really covered it very well in terms of the technology and its potential. But I can tell you how we look at it, because obviously we're in Silicon Valley, so we're supposed to be preoccupied with this. Everybody is, otherwise it won't be self-respecting. My interests and our firm's
Safa,
interests.
can I, as by way of, you all should know that Safa disclosed in Zurich a fun fact of him meeting with Eric Schmidt and the Google team early days when I don't know how many employees there were, when he was an analyst on covering search. So that you are the perfect person, you know, in a way to opine on this, and even more so because you're actually investing in the space. So
We
should
are, that's true. I mean, search has been a focus for me for the past 20 years. I wrote a report that became pretty famous called the Golden Search Report. And that was when nobody was really thinking search could be useful, let alone a big market, because it was a land of InfoSeek and Alta Vista and others that was full of ads. But anyway, yeah, I met with Sergey and Larry when they were about 12 or 20 people, and then later on with Eric Schmidt 2 weeks after he had joined. And I remember in the meeting, he asked me, what do you think we should do for a business model? Because they didn't have any business model at that time. And I said, you should look at GoTo.com. GoTo.com is the company that invented search monetization model based on the per click and moving people who are paying more on the top of the click. And he said, yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. Of course, I'm sure he knew what to do. It wasn't that he followed just my suggestion, but that's exactly what they did. And the rest is history, as they say. They had to pay about a $500 million fine because that was a patented model. So search
Yeah, it
has
sure
really
was.
been, yeah, Terry would remember that. And it's actually an interesting historical tech history project for someone who would have time and interest, that how GoTo.com could have been the Google now, and they lost it because that at that time search wasn't that difficult yet. It is right now. Almost extremely difficult or impossible to replace Google given the scale. But at that time, it wasn't. Monetization was the key. So anyway, so given that background, and thanks, Mark, for bringing it up because it is quite appropriate. One of the key issues here is Google going to be replaced? Is this a threat to Google? So our interest from the venture capital point of view is A, the impact on the technology landscape, B, what investment opportunities we have, and C, something that's really dear close to me is its impact on society, jobs, and the economy. So I want to just share with you a few things about what so far we have found, and I'm in the very early stages of understanding this, by the way. So ChatGPT is an excellent search curation engine. It does that so well that it becomes more efficient to use ChatGPT rather than Google in some cases. But it doesn't mean Google can't do this. So let's remember, Transformers was created by Google. And Google still has several major projects, including Lambda and other ones that are getting pretty close. And by the way, I don't know how many people know, but Quora, which is a question and answer engine, just announced a product called Poe, P-O-E, like Edgar Allan Poe, and it works just like ChatGPT. I encourage you to try it. In fact, I tried several questions and the answers were almost exactly the same. I don't know about the technology. I don't know how they trained it and how much of a corpus of knowledge they have, but there are other players that are coming up. So when we talk about ChatGPT, at least when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about a technology, not just OpenAI company, because that's just the beginning. So search curation is one very useful application of it. Second would be what they've been talked about with my friend from Bangladesh, writing memos, creating something in someone else's style, and all sorts of basically scaling and increasing efficiency of writings. It is terribly useful, but I do want to also raise a caution here because it seems so interesting that I can say, write me a shopping list in the style of Shakespeare, that it seems like it could be useful. Not everything that's interesting is necessarily useful. It is amazing for us because it's coming from a machine and some bunch of codes, but that doesn't, again, mean it has tremendous applications. Third, would be practical applications. I loved what Terry talked about in terms of travel. That has been really my project for the past 20 years, Terry, and I haven't seen someone do that. And I would love to be able to see that. I think there are probably more business model challenges than just technology challenges in creating a truly intelligent engine that can find the right travel combination for you. One of my first investments was a company that was acquired by Google, which was trying to do the very same thing for restaurants. So that's one application. Concerns are quite a few, by the way. One is that ChatGPT and models like that have no understanding of what they're saying. They're simply going through what they have learned and putting together based on a probabilistic model what should come next. And that model is very accurate, so it gives you something that sounds quite plausible. Second, it is not always accurate. True, this can probably be improved quite a bit, but it is important to realize that there is no references given so far. At least the Poe gives you some references in terms of what answers it gives, but it's not always accurate. And the problem is that it is packaged in a way that some people might think it is accurate, especially if you're getting legal or medical advice, it could be problematic. Third, because of this, there is potential for abuse. Fortunately, some aspects of it, at least ChatGPT and OpenAI, have taken some measures to prevent it from being used to create misinformation, but not everyone will be as careful. So I think that's one of the biggest concerns. And finally, in terms of longer term potential use, it doesn't have any opinion. Opinion is important. Even if you scale it to the level of the neurons that is in our mind, that is in our brain, you still need people to have creativity, originality, and opinion. There is no way that a model, a generative model, a large language model can create that. It is simply going through what it has learned on the internet and Wikipedia. So these are important aspects of it to consider and to bear in mind, because as I said, the answers it gives are quite convincing in a human-like manner. And I think it will be very useful for certain applications. We are looking for investments and companies that can be on top of it as a layer, like examples that, for instance, Terry talked about, as well as, bear in mind, we need a layer beyond, underneath it. API layers can actually connect to the existing systems and get things done. So I do think there are quite a bit of opportunities available that would be available based on this model. But I do want to caution people thinking that we just entered a new revolution. I hear people saying this is bigger than iPhone, bigger than internet, bigger than everything. I don't think so. It is more incremental, but it is incremental in a very fundamental way. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions.
Got a couple questions. So Joel, you spoke first already, and I would rarely never let Rob jump over people, but I haven't spoken yet. So go ahead.
Well, I appreciate the respect of raising hands. This was more, I think, Terry. Terry, I think years ago we were at something in Washington or Richmond, Virginia. He spoke at this conference. I wanted to ask you all about mobility. When you were viewing this, the growth of mobility and people doing this, on their PDAs versus doing it from their desks, is that something you anticipated to be as robust, or were you just sort of banking on this on the sector of travel?
Well, we were banking on travel. We didn't know, I mean, we started Kayak, for example, that, today travel bookings, I think it's almost 70% are mobile. I think the difference with this will be the addition of voice, and simply be able to speak your question and get an answer. The answer needs to be text and images, at least in travel. You don't want to listen to somebody droning on about something that's like talking to a travel agent 50 years ago. But I think as you combine the ability to use voice with this and ask those questions, we actually tested that at Wayblazer, and it was amazing in terms of how quickly people jumped into that, asking very difficult questions and getting robust answers. So I think if you combine that with mobility, it's funny, we all talk to our phones. Not many of us talk to our desktops as much as we talk to our phones. It's just habitual, I think, but I think you're going to see a lot more of it.
Joel?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I just wanted to weigh in a little bit. I was lucky enough, I have a friend in India who had developed a Chat GPT type system over a year ago that I started using for blog posts and different things I was writing. I found it to be a nice way to augment my creativity. It helped me overcome writer's block. It created scenarios that allowed me to be more effective in what I was creating. But I think the actual application of this tool, it becomes an almost deflationary tool because it's ultimately going to make people think that they can be replaced, whether they're going to be replaced or not. And it's potentially is going to take some white collar jobs away. But I think another thing to think about, the way this tool is strafing the internet, we're going to run out of data. It's going to reach a point where it eats everything up. And then where do we go from there with this? And where is it headed? In diffusion of innovation, I mean, we're talking to early adopters and fast followers right now, but I think this is much bigger than things like Bitcoin. It is kind of search-like in its nature to what Google was doing early on. But I think, this is kind of a wave to ride that we need to be looking at best practice now. And people need to be thinking in terms of how can we make things better? Deep fakes, all that stuff, they're always going to be bad actors. I think the positioning now is how do we use this in such a way that we can overcome that? Anyway, I'll stop there.
Anybody want to? I got intuitive reactions, but I'll let the communities respond.
Yeah, Joe, that's a great point in terms of, we actually do have that problem of we are kind of running out of books to read, right? So there's only so many books available, and so much content that's legally and publicly available. So that's certainly a thing. But I think what, and also the point of it, I asked that question, this is bigger than the iPhone. And I think, it's not so much one company doing this, but collectively, I think this might be. And you see a lot of open source efforts now where they're replicating what ChatGPT has accomplished. And it's done in a very open way, a surprisingly open way, where really, if I, myself, even if I wanted to put the budget into hardware, we could literally buy the servers, hire the hardware engineers and create a ChatGPT equivalent at some point. And, it might make sense to do that at some point. So I think collectively, we're going to see this enormous economic impact. And in terms of replacing anyone, I think, I've struggles with that possibility because everyone's going to have it. So if you're replaceable, well, you get to use it too. It's not like we're going to have, 100 million writers that we're going to exclude because dozens and dozens of companies will have these generative AIs that they make available. So, I don't really, the only people getting replaced are people that are just unwilling to use a new tool. And I don't think that's a lot of people in the long run.
I think that's a bit of a red herring as well. But what I love what ChatGPT is doing, being a professor for a while and teaching adjunct, I love to see higher education disrupted. And I love the fact that we have to start to change the way that we're teaching people what writing means, because writing is about thinking well. And if we're asking these tools to be a proxy for our brains, it's going to lack things that we have that the tool doesn't have. So
we had that. So I know you went to Denison, Terry Jones went to Denison. We're liberal arts, we're taught to think, right?
Yeah.
You can learn anything if you know how to think. But I think I'd be curious to bring, I was talking about Eric Lindbergh, who invests in well, you'll see him as a foundation CIO, but there's some definitely, I want that's a big collective question. Everybody is who do we know collectively who's on top of this, both usage and maybe even thinking several steps down the road, including the ethics involved in as we do our next follow-on gathering. And maybe you've got that figured out, Kirash, as you co-lead this ecosystem. But that's what I'd be curious for everybody to weigh in on if you have any.
So the next thing that could be is kind of like targeting one of those AI startups or anything, and bring on someone technical to talk about the details of how they're creating it and how they're using it. So that's one way we could tackle it, to talk about the technical aspects, such as like using the data and using the how they're storing it and what they're doing with it and all those different things.
And I would add on to Kirash, this is about data ethics and how are we using data and how is data being used to determine the future? And are we basing our decisions on data that is shaped in a way that excludes people? So I've been working very closely with Renee Cummings. She's the data activist in residence at the University of Virginia. She's a Brookings Institution scholar. She's actually coming to Grand Rapids again next week to continue this discussion about disrupting data injustice. So, I mean, it's a very deep well, and ChatGPT is in some ways the tip of the iceberg, but the inherent bias in data is something we don't talk about very often either.
Well, I know, Adam, you got your hand up, but Carolina, did you looked as if you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I have a couple comments, but I don't know how to raise the hand here. I was trying to figure that out. But yeah, a couple of theories that, because I think that's a good trend that we started. How do we see ChatGPT evolving over the next 10 years, let's say, right? And it's there's at the moment it's plugged into a different audio, video, drawings, apps that can be develop in different direction. But a good theory that I've heard was that there may be a centralized, negatively biased AIs, right, looking to take advantage, whether it's advertising or in other way, and use the data against us. But in that scenario, AI ultimately is supposed to be our friend. So in this scenario, every person would have their own AI to defend them against the opposite AIs, right? So can you see that? Because I think what's changing is how we interact with Google search. In reality, we're changing from typing and searching to more a conversation, right? So if it's going to become our friend, whether it's drawing or whether it's calculating or whether it's doing audio augmentation, it's becoming our friend. Do you think this is the way it's going to look like? Like we have our friend here on our side, and perhaps there's other AIs, using the data maybe in a different way.
I don't think ChatGPT is anybody's friend because it is not capable of friendship. It doesn't have any sense of family or friendship or relationship. It just gives you data in a way that we are typically used, presented by humans. And I think that's really where both the scaling and efficiency gains that Ishtar talked about will come from, and also the risks, especially on the education. I'm totally with Joel on this, that it can actually completely disrupt education, but I'm not sure in a positive way, because exactly as you said, Joel, I'm totally believer that good writing means good thinking. And good thinking is the way that we can have an aware society that can move forward. If we kind of outsource our thinking to ChatGPT and get a good grade because of that, because it can collect the best ways that have already been said, then how our kids are going to learn to think, to be critical thinkers for that matter? To me, those are really some of the critical questions to ask. So I don't think ChatGPT will be anybody's friends, but it can be a great pretender for that.
Well, yeah, but but the educational system has not changed for, for a very long time, right? And if you go to the origins of why it was created, it was to create workers that work from 9 to 5, right? So not necessarily what you've been taught at school at the moment is the right thing, and you don't know, if AI is not going to improve it in reality and make you think other things and outsource the basic skills to it. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, finish there. Yeah.
Andrew, your hands up.
Yeah, thanks for a great discussion. On the heels of what Safa just said, is there any data that shows the percentage of, I guess, the global population that is just shows resistance to engaging with the chat GPT technology? In other words, what portion still want to talk to humans? I mean, is it reserved for an older demographic?
You mean culturally?
Culturally.
And what can an Iran or China do to stop its usage?
I don't have any data. I don't know if Sanjay or Kriyash have any data. I think that the risk is that it actually will sound like human. So somebody could put an engine on top of ChatGPT with a human-like voice. So it wouldn't seem like you're talking to a machine necessarily.
I don't.
The data is evolving. If you looked at a year ago, 73% of people prefer not to talk to an AI. Of course, these were these older LSTM-based models, and they were sort of engineered to force you down a path. Sometimes that was designed very well, and a lot of times it wasn't. So, you're seeing, 0 to 1 million people in ChatGPT within 5 days. I think it's up to 100 million now, a couple months later. So I think you're going to run out of people that, have resistance to that. But there's definitely a shift where, there's also the voice component, right? So this is texting that is definitely generational. About 79% of Generation Y really see, phone calls like fax machines. So they don't want to talk to anybody, whether it's an AI or a person. They just want to send a text message, get things done. And then, we feel have an appointment to do any other kind of business, because they're in environments, they're sharing housing, or, they're with their family. Like they just really, just like we are on Zoom calls a lot, that's a lot of people. That's a billion people now. So if I'm in the middle of a Zoom call, I'd much rather someone text me right now and respond than have to pick up my phone and interrupt, what I'm doing here on the Zoom call. So I think you're seeing those types of shifts, and the data is really very rapidly evolving. But there's definitely I would say there's a lot of data suggesting there's a preference for text, even in older generations, over voice. Whether people would prefer to talk to an AI or a human, that's evolving. I think we'll learn that, in the next couple of months or years.
Adam, question?
Yeah, I want to start with, this is a absolutely fascinating discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations and comments. It reminds me of Space Odyssey 2001 and HAL. So my question on that is, with these logarithms learning, the process of learning in chat, and there's a thing called ASM Brains in the metaverse that learns and actually picks up a personality. Do you have a feel for where we are in terms of the dynamics of that, where you actually get an AI brain that is thinking critically?
I think you're talking about the singularity, essentially. That's what you're kind of getting toward. And
Correct.
What is a community of neurons anyway? We all have neurons, and all these neurons fire in our brains. We all share that. That said, I don't see this as a human. I agree with Safa on that. And I feel like we're not necessarily asking the right question here. Do people prefer to talk to humans or a machine? People want interaction. I'm thinking of like mental health care. Think of the value of a chat GPT in the mental health field. and for people that just need companionship. 70% of US citizens are unhappy with their jobs right now. Where are those people going? Where do they end up? You know, there needs to be some way that this tool can provide, I guess, a greater good. I mean, I guess that's what we have to look toward. And I kind of feel like it's a tool that we're going to slowly adopt and adapt to, and it'll become just another search engine almost. That's how I feel.
Well, we're all about connectivity. I would like it to be a tool either to, to someone who actually could help that person who needs that whatever the type of help of interventions that they need. And frankly, I'm looking at Jim Hawk. I like in the Matrix, we just had this Miami event. It was such a great event, but I wish I could have just frozen time and grabbed this person, grabbed Sanjay, right, and brought him over to meet Safa about this subject or whatever. I'm hoping that this can help with more connectivity, human connectivity. At least for me. Maybe it's from my own bias.
Yeah, we're working with a matchmaker in a couple of use cases. One is actually a romantic matchmaker, but also for investor events and also for kind of job interviews. So we think that's a big part of it. If you look at Zappos, right? So Zappos had this culture of always responding when the customer called, and the funny thing, people used it for therapy. They use it as a personal assistant. There were examples where, Tony, she was speaking about, there was a woman in LA, it was like 2 a.m. She was just hungry and she had drank too much. It's like, can someone please just get me? She called Zappos and they literally ordered her a pizza and charged it to her account. And that was the type of thing that made Zappos great. So I think now, is Zappos a good therapist or is it a good, kind of personal assistant? No, but people will gravitate toward what's available. So there is some evidence suggesting that just interacting with ChatGPT, and there's some other apps that are, based on reproducing actual human beings, where therapy is an interesting component to this. Whether that's legal and liability, that's a whole other matter. But therapists are expensive and not really available. So if you can't afford a session and you can't get one for a month, are you going to use some kind of generative AI as a form of therapy? I think you'll start to see that. Like people use Zappos as therapy and as a personal assistant, even though that was not the intended purpose.
Got it.
Mark, if I may, I wanted to raise a question maybe for future discussions on ChatGPT and in general AI as its potential to increase productivity. Productivity over the past 30, 40 years really hasn't changed. And it's been a puzzle to the economists and thinkers and observers as to why is it? We actually mapped it. I went back to, I got some data from Bureau of Labor Statistics and mapped it since 1948. And when you put major events, PC chip, transistor chip, internet, iPhone, mobile, AI, none of those, even with some gaps of 5 or 10 years, seem to have any noticeable impact on productivity. Now, I've got my own theories as to why or how we should look at it. But the question is, can something like generative AI and large-scale language models that can really help us scale our production quite a bit finally move the productivity up or not? I don't know the answer for that. I am also beginning to think maybe we are too focused on productivity increase, because I think what has happened with all these technologies over the past 50 years is that quality of life has improved, but productivity as measured by output divided by the hours worked hasn't moved a whole lot. It's been increasing at about 2% or just under that in the past few years. But that's the question that I wonder, and I just wanted to pose it to everyone.
I think it certainly makes people more productive. The question is, how does it work globally when everyone has access to it? So is everyone more productive, or are they just, equally productive competing with each other with better tools.
Where
think
is productivity leading us is my question, because it's obviously not necessarily getting us to where we want to go. Brings up the whole idea of degrowth and that whole movement of kind of rewinding things a little bit, because if we're only focused on a bottom line, that bottom line is eventually going to run out. And that single variable is going to run out. So maybe Chat GPT allows us to have more variables and be more creative about where we really want to go. What can the future really hold?
Joel, that brings up a deeper point in it. We've had the same argument when we came to automation after the last industrial revolution. What is all this automation and machinery and robotics and all this going to do for the worker? And we saw what it did, because without proper monopolistic controls, anti-competitive practice controls, we end up in the same boat we are now. But the impact of this Chat GPT, of this AI, is going to have a lot more effect on a lot more users than just the manufacturing personnel that have been offshored.
So Kirash, you've had your hand up a long time.
Okay. I have some other thoughts besides the productivity of quality of work. It's kind of like with ChatGPT, it's we're talking about it's words and text based. It's not based on like image or videos. And if you, for example, asked it, so how was the movie in 007? What happened to it? It's not going to give you the output of that information. So we are a little bit far away from that, but it's going to go that far to that extent sooner or later. And at the same time, we have the position that if you, for example, live in Vermont and you go on the outside of the city and you try to speak with someone in the rural areas, and they have some slangs, some certain words they use in their basic hometown. And if you put that in ChatGPT, it's not going to give you any output. It's going to say, I don't know what that means. Or if you try to go into into the South or something and try to say some words in those slangs, it's not going to give you the output. It's still not based on the rural areas of the dialect, but it's the majority of the English language or French or Italian or all those different languages too.
Other comments, questions?
There's a
There's
lot of
something just-
questions in the chat, actually, which I'm just noticing.
I couldn't quite follow your question, Denise. Or is the productivity of higher quality as a result?
Sorry for the discombobulated response. More of a statement. I mean, just generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of technology as a whole. I think a lot of it ends up on the trash heap because it's oftentimes different flavors of the same thing. But AI for me is such a powerful advancement because it's in the hands of the everyday user and it's giving the everyday person choice in how they do their work. So for me, I think even though it might be in its infancy to some extent, I think the power of the development of AI in the flow of our work is the greatest efficiency driver and variable because people want it. You're not forcing it on me. I'm looking for it. And I guess the other question I had is AI's had a lot of winters in the past, but something has happened for it to become normalized, that it is literally the conversation at school pickup line. So has this experience over the last 2 years of people, everyone being forced to be more digitally aware, been the catalyst that has moved this into the mainstream? I would love to know the thoughts on that.
I don't know if it really has moved to mainstream as much yet, Denise. I think part of the reason that it's so popular right now and everyone is talking about it because it is shown to do some amazing stuff that we never expected a chatbot to be able to do. To be able to talk in someone's language, to be able to emulate style and rewrite a memo, and all those things that we never thought a machine can do, it's doing right now, and it's just impressing people quite a bit. I don't think it has proved to be very efficient yet because it's new. It hasn't been really used by many industries yet, but I think it's the awe factor of it that's causing everyone to talk about it. It kind of reminds me a bit like when Google first came out with the satellite images that showed up close what's going on in the cities. And I remember at one of my conferences, we talked about this and everybody was awed. Oh my God, we can see the buildings and everything is quite interesting. And somebody actually was charismatic, said, I don't understand, this is impressive, but what's so useful about seeing the roofs of the buildings? And of course, it wasn't very useful until they actually had street views and other things. And to me, it's a little bit of that awe factor that's capturing everyone's imagination right now.
All right, Michael Hammer.
Yeah, so
Oh, and by the way, anybody that's in Ohio, I think we're getting together at 2 o'clock tomorrow, either downtown or in Easton. So Kevin Lloyd, others, carry on.
to the question about whether it's moved into the mainstream, I don't think it has. What's happened is the Overton window has changed, has moved into the mainstream, which enables more things to happen with it in terms of how it's used, the acceptance of people in general.
You used the Overton? I'm not familiar with that.
Oh,
Sorry.
you should look it up. So basically, to
I
give
have
an
you.
example, Donald Trump moved the Overton window for how we engage in politics. Things that were formerly unacceptable are now acceptable. Right? So it's it changes the way that society at large thinks about things.
Right.
If I may just quick comment with regards to the mainstream. So I recently, this week, I think I've heard that Microsoft Teams is integrating ChatGPT into capturing the notes, right? So a job that no one ever wanted. And then you can actually quiz the notes and ask them questions, who said what, and then from there it can schedule meetings, right? If it's not mainstream, like everyone using Microsoft is going to be using that now, right? I think that's pretty mainstream, and that's also answered the question with regards to optimization of the workload, right? It's going to make you definitely more efficient if it's going to start scheduling meetings on the basis of the discussions that you had in the chat. That's going to be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's mainstream yet, but I have seen anecdotally, like just, even the personal trainer at my building that, runs the HIT fitness class. I've just seen more people sort of, they're not in tech or AI or business or investing, kind of be aware of it. So whether or not it's mainstream, I don't know, it's a little bit moot. It's becoming mainstream faster than almost anything we've ever heard of, perhaps faster than anything we've ever heard of. I think Angry Birds is the competitor for the next closest app that got to 1 million users, but we're, that was 2 months ago. Now we're at 100 million, and we're approaching 1 billion. So it's becoming mainstream really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Duncan asked if ChatGPT can do legal work. And to me, the answer is yes, a qualified yes. Actually, I think legal profession is one, like the copyright profession, that can benefit, can also, some jobs can be replaced by it, because as long as it's supervised, legal field is excellent because it needs discovery, it needs vast amount of information, as well as sometimes just rules and regulations of, that are spread around. So to me, that's a definite good application for it.
Yeah, I'd concur, basically. I think the So last year, right, it was the whole year I used something similar to ChatGPT until ChatGPT was released, at the end of the year. And when serving my clients, I noticed that what would have taken me about a week research and everything else, campaign, that took me just, maybe about 24 hours, something like that. So it's, I think that, yes, you're right. Some of the, anyone who is charging by the hour, okay, you are, or a professional that's charging by the hour, you probably, unless you're using something like ChatGPT to speed things up, and that's honestly what it does, is allows you to go through, stuff very quickly. You're going to be replaced by someone who's using it, basically. Okay, not, you still have a job, but, if someone can do it, the job faster, yeah, that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
Andrew.
Yeah, I've had some exposure to, through a friend of ours from Denison who's afflicted with Lou Gehrig's disease. There's a technology, speaking of Microsoft, that tracks eye movement. And my question is, and it translates that into text and email. Is there any kind of interface with the current technology that you gentlemen are discussing?
Anyone?
I don't know of any technology on top of ChatGPT per se, but there are technologies that have been used to connect the computer brain interaction to do some of the things that you're talking about. But it would be interesting if it was also tied to a massive database and a learning system like ChatGPT.
I get that question a lot about, voice access, people with vision problems. And, that's something, I often use the voice recognition on iOS 16 on my Apple phone. So I think you're going to see text as the interface, and then a different level of the operating system or hardware will convert, whether it's voice or eye movements, or, there's also, I think Meta has a wristband that, detects neurological activity based on, just having a wristband. So I think you're going to see those translated into text, not necessarily something that the language models connect to directly, but it seems to work in a lot of cases.
Well, I'd be curious what other people want to do with the next discussions. Maybe just give a few minutes to that before we break.
Can I'm going to put something in the chat. I've mentioned Renee Cummings. I have a hybrid event next week that is going to touch on this topic. It's a free event. I'm just going to drop it in there. The description, we're going to talk about predictive analytics and algorithms and efficiency, but, are these algorithms creating trade-offs, essentially? And are we losing people in the data? So it's a discussion regarding AI ethics and kind of the future of our algorithmic society. So if anyone's interested, feel free to sign up. It'll be hybrid.
Thank you, Joel.
Yeah, for sure.
But the drinks aren't hybrid, I'm guessing.
Got to be in person for those.
Exactly.
So are you suggesting where to take this discussion itself?
That's right. And even, and by the way, as we architect, we and I promise to do this, and I need to do a better job of following up. But basically, for all of our major events, London, the Impact event in New York, West Coast, Mumbai, Singapore, and Ohio, we have a form so everybody can fill out who they think speakers should be for breakouts and panels, what additional panels. And now we're going to try to create a system for these, let's say, deep dives, and somewhat impromptu, not quite impromptu, but so that we get them and then scheduled and mobilization calls so that these things can roll. I don't know if ChatGPT can play a role in all that, but
I think we should talk about it as generative AI as opposed to ChatGPT. I believe. Chat GPT is an outcome of it.
Sure.
And that's a broader term that allows us to talk across it.
So Mark, I would suggest that we can focus or try to come up with maybe 3 to 5 areas where we think generative AI and AI in general will be most influential and will be a game changer, as well as maybe 3 to 5 areas where we think there could be major impact, possibly negative impact, or otherwise a change that the society has to deal with. When we've been talking about, for instance, potential job losses or job changes, could this be something like globalization that obviously created major shifts? As a whole, it was really positive for the world and economy and society, but it did create disparities and cause some of the issues in society we saw. So those would be examples of the impact I'm talking about. But I think it would be useful to also identify some areas that we think would be most beneficial. And I do think legal and potentially medical even is useful. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the news a couple of weeks ago that somebody ran the medical test that the doctors do on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT actually was able to pass, not with great grades, but it was pass. And it does make sense because all the knowledge is there on the internet, so it should be able to pass that.
Fair enough. Samir?
Yeah, so the suggestion I had was, as I put in the chat, there's a lot of intersectionality, right? That, clearly ChatGPT is just one application of generative AI, but it's going to affect every field of human activity. When you combine it with, say, robotics or autonomous vehicles or, even financial advisory or whatever, that has implications in each of those spaces. So it would be interesting, I guess, to take a deep dive in terms of further topics into, okay, how would it affect, let's say, financial advisory or investing, perhaps venture investing or private equity or, something else.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, I think we're going to be thinking about that in the next couple of days. Anything?
I'll just say one thing about the legal. I think Nick, you posted about the indemnification clause that ChatGPT came up with. Now the fun thing is that I actually asked something similar to ChatGPT to come up with a contract, and I showed it to my lawyer, over here in Bangladesh, and he actually found a lot of. Remember, it's a generative one that works on words, right? What's the most possible next word comes through, and it had a lot of contradictions. It left a couple of loopholes in the contract, so it's you can use ChatGPT to maybe come up with the contract, but make sure you get it checked by a lawyer.
Well, having been a practicing lawyer, it's often what's not what you don't see. Or it's something that you haven't considered and how things interrelate with your objectives.
Yeah, definitely. I was just
one thing I've started doing this is I call ChatGPT with if ChatGPT had a tone of voice, it would be like a British upper class, like everything it writes, it sounds like it's amazing. Oh my God, this is perfect. This is amazing. But just get it checked out, just to be on the safe side.
But it's like, I think there's a lot of usage. We'd probably just need that experienced hand of a human to.
I was just showing it so that you could see, because I'm no lawyer either, so I wouldn't wouldn't use it, but that's the answer it was giving, just so whoever, because someone earlier asked the question of can it do that? So, but anyway, I
think it depends on the question is that even possible? So, is ChatGPT able to be a lawyer? No, not at all. But is it possible to create a generative AI that could be an effective attorney, at least at a more junior level? That's the question. I don't know the answer to that. Or the answer is probably yes, but is that in the near term or is that decades away? That's what I think we'll figure out.
Before I go, I think that's here. There is kind of, I'm trying to think of the search term, but this is an area that Renee Cummings touches on, and that there is kind of AI justice right now. There's a whole field of research in it, and it's just trying to find the search term she shared with me. But we're closer to that than we think, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, the other thing I'm doing, because just it's been working, is creating some WhatsApp groups around specific subjects. So if it's useful to have this for the continuation of I'll start using regenerative AI / GPT, Chat GPT. Let me know. I'll start one. That's what we did for the other communities.
I think it's useful because we can share articles and other items and things that we find that the whole community can use and opine on.
As a millennial, I could share you guys some of the memes and some of the comics that goes on social media and Instagram and all that stuff. I have been making a couple of jokes with it at the same time too, so I could share those in the group at the same time too, so you guys know what's the AI can be responding to it and all that stuff.
Sounds good.
Mark, I have to run, and everyone, I enjoyed this very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
bye, everybody.